He told his friends I'm high maintenance for asking him to help with dishes. Would you believe me if I told you my marriage nearly unraveled because I asked my husband to help with dishes? I know, it sounds ridiculous, like the punchline to some joke about nagging wives and clueless husbands. But I'm sitting here at my kitchen table in Scottsdale, Arizona, hands trembling a little even now, staring at the sunlight splashing across the tile, and I can promise you, nothing about what happened felt like a joke. If you stick with me, I'll show you how one word, just one, tossed out like a crumpled napkin, set off a chain reaction that forced me to question everything. My marriage, my friendships, even the version of myself I'd spent years building. By the end, you'll understand why I'll never hear the phrase high maintenance the same way again. I want you to picture this. It's a Tuesday night, the kind that just drips with exhaustion. The kitchen smells like last night's pad thai, the takeout boxes still stacked in the recycling that's overflowing by the back door. Our daughter Chloe's swim bag is leaking pool water onto the welcome mat, and Mason's sneakers, muddy from soccer, are somehow right in the path of anyone coming in from the garage. The house is buzzing with the usual chaos. Chloe singing some Taylor Swift song at the top of her lungs, while Mason tries to convince Alexa to play Minecraft music for the 10th time. I'm standing at the sink, my hair pulled back in a messy bun, sleeves rolled up, staring at the mountain of plates and glasses. Some of them aren't even from today. There's a half-empty bottle of Merlot on the counter, a leftover from the wine night I never quite got around to hosting for the other moms on Elm Street. I remember thinking, if I start now, maybe I'll get through this before the kids start fighting over whose turn it is with the iPad. My iPhone keeps buzzing. PTA group chat again. Something about the upcoming bake sale, who can bring gluten-free cupcakes, who's allergic to what this week, and why Mrs. Henderson's third-grade class always seems to get the best slots at the science fair. Normally, I'd just power through, but tonight, I'm running on fumes. I glance at Brandon, my husband, who's sprawled on the sectional, scrolling through ESPN on his iPad, AirPods in, half listening to a podcast about some sports trade. He looks up as I open the dishwasher, and I try to catch his eye. Hey, do you mind helping me with these dishes? My voice comes out softer than I mean. I don't want to start a fight. I just need help. That's all. He doesn't even pause his scrolling. What? Are you going high maintenance on me now? There's a half smile on his face, like he's waiting for me to laugh along. Something in my chest twists. I force a little laugh, because that's what I've learned to do. It's easier than making it a thing, right? But later, as I'm wiping dried sauce off a plate, the words echo over and over. High maintenance. Like wanting a little support makes me demanding. Like I'm some spoiled princess for needing a hand with the mess our whole family made. If I'm being honest, this wasn't the first time I'd heard it. Maybe not that exact phrase, but the sentiment. It slips out in little ways. The eye roll when I ask Brandon to pick up his socks, the sigh when I remind him about the HOA meeting, the jokes he makes about wine moms who need their me time just to survive another day of carpool. Sometimes I wonder if he hears himself. Sometimes I wonder if I've just gotten too good at letting things slide for the sake of peace. That night, after the kids are finally in bed, Chloe with her Taylor Swift playlist, Mason clutching his stuffed dinosaur, I go through the motions. I set up the coffee for the morning, wipe down the counters, double-check that the side door is locked. Scottsdale nights are quiet, mostly. The kind of quiet that makes you notice the little things. The hum of the fridge, the way the cactus outside the window throws strange shadows against the wall. The faint sound of Brandon laughing at something on his phone from the living room. I watch him for a minute, wondering what it would be like to just sit. To not worry about whether the kitchen is clean, whether the lunches are packed, whether the laundry will get folded this week or next. I want you to know I'm not perfect. My Instagram might show a different story. Chloe's soccer trophies lined up just so, Mason's finger paintings taped above the fireplace, my own messy bun filtered to look effortlessly chic. But the truth is, I'm tired. Not just the kind of tired that comes from too little sleep and too much caffeine, but the kind that settles in your bones when you feel unseen. When you start to wonder if wife and mom are all you'll ever be, and if anyone even notices what you give up to keep everything running. The next morning, I try to shake it off. Brandon heads out early. He's got a meeting in Tempe, some big tech client he's been chasing for weeks. He gives me a quick kiss on the cheek, barely glancing up from his phone as he scrolls through his calendar. "Don't forget Mason's dentist appointment at 2, he calls over his shoulder. I bite back the urge to say, "You could take him, you know." Instead, I smile and nod, because that's what's expected. I load the kids into the SUV, our black Tahoe, which I secretly resent for being so big, so suburban, so cliché. The carpool line at Desert Vista Elementary crawls along, and I wave at Nicole through the window. She's in her yoga gear, Starbucks cup in hand, hair somehow perfect even at 8 a.m. I envy her, just a little. She seems to glide through mornings while I stumble, always one step behind. After drop-off, I swing by Trader Joe's for groceries. The aisles are crowded with other moms, all in some version of the same uniform. Leggings, oversized sweatshirts, messy buns or ponytails, reusable bags slung over their shoulders. We nod at each other, a silent acknowledgement of shared exhaustion. I grab organic strawberries for Chloe, gluten-free waffles for Mason, a new bottle of Merlot for myself. A small treat, because why not? Back home, I unload the groceries, sort the laundry, and scroll through the PTA emails piling up in my inbox. There's a reminder about the Teacher Appreciation Luncheon, a sign-up for the Spring Carnival, a request for volunteers to chaperone the third-grade field trip to the Phoenix Zoo. I add it all to the family calendar on my phone, color-coded and packed so tight it looks like a game of Tetris. Somewhere in there, I squeeze in a quick shower, just in time to get to my 11 a.m. Pilates class. It's the only hour I get to myself most days, and even then, I spend half of it checking my phone for texts from the school or reminders about Chloe's orthodontist appointment. It's during the cool-down that Nicole corners me, a sly grin on her face. "Rough night?" she asks, her voice low. "You look like you could use a girl's night." I laugh, brush it off, but she presses. "Seriously, Steph, you okay? You seem tense." I want to tell her everything. The sting of Brandon's words, the way I can't shake the feeling that I'm asking for too much. But instead, I shrug. "Just tired, you know? Kids, house, the usual." Nicole nods, sympathetic but distracted. "You need to let Brandon handle the dishes once in a while. Guys are useless at home unless you spell it out for them." She means it as a joke, but something in me flinches. After Pilates, I check my phone. 3 missed texts from Brandon. He needs his blue dress shirt ironed for tomorrow, wants to know if I picked up more oat milk, asks if I remembered to Venmo his half of the HOA fee to our neighbor Greg. I answer, yes, and yes, with a smiley face. Because that's the version of me he likes best. Agreeable, efficient, low maintenance. But the word sticks in my mind all day. High maintenance. I find myself replaying little moments over the past few months. The way Brandon jokes about my obsession with keeping the house clean, his offhand comments about wine moms on Facebook, the way he tells his friends I'm the organized one, as if it's a flaw, something to be tolerated. I remember a dinner last month at Olive Garden with his college buddies, sitting across from Brandon as he recounted some story about my crazy labeling system for the pantry. "She's a little high maintenance," he'd said, raising his glass. And everyone laughed. I laughed too, but inside I felt small. Maybe it's silly to care about words. But when they pile up, day after day, year after year, they start to feel like stones in your pocket, weighing you down until you can barely remember what it felt like to walk free. That afternoon, as I'm folding laundry in the living room, I hear Brandon's voice drift in from the backyard. He's on the phone, probably with one of his friends from work. His tone is light, joking. "Yeah, Steph's on another one about the dishes," he says, and I freeze. There's a pause, then laughter. "You know how it is. She's got standards." More laughter. I swear these Pinterest moms, man, High maintenance, all of them. I stand there, clutching one of Mason's t-shirts, heart pounding in my chest. I realize then that it's not just a private joke between us. It's how he describes me to other people. It's the story he tells about our marriage, about me. And in that moment, something shifts. I'm not sure what, exactly, but it feels like a crack running through the middle of my life. For years, I've tried so hard to be easy, to not ask for too much, to keep the peace, to shoulder the invisible load that comes with being just a mom. But now I wonder, at what cost? I wish I could say I confronted him right then and there, that I marched outside and told him how much it hurt to be reduced to a punchline. But I didn't. Instead, I finished folding the laundry, stacked it neatly on the stairs, and started dinner. Chloe's favorite chicken Alfredo, Mason's broccoli steamed just the way he likes it. I set the table, poured myself a glass of Merlot, and waited for Brandon to come inside and pretend that everything was normal. But inside, something was unraveling, and I had no idea just how much worse it was about to get. I remember setting out the plates that night, the ones with the little blue edge I bought from Crate and Barrel after our wedding, thinking that maybe if I made everyone's favorite meal, things would feel normal again. The house was humming with the usual chaos. Mason chasing Chloe through the hallway, both of them shrieking with laughter, their bare feet slapping against the hardwood. The smell of garlic bread mingled with the faint tang of laundry detergent and something else, an undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite name yet. Brandon walked in just as I was draining the pasta, his phone in hand, his eyes flicking up at me for a split second before returning to whatever was on his screen. He mumbled something about traffic on the 101 and dropped his backpack on the kitchen chair, same as always. I waited for him to look at me, to say hi, to notice that I'd made his favorite salad with the pepperoncini he always asks for. But instead, he wandered off to check the mail, and I caught my own reflection in the microwave. Shoulders hunched, smile frozen, the kind of look I'd sworn I'd never wear. Dinner itself was so ordinary it was almost surreal. The kids bickered over who got the last breadstick. Brandon scrolled through his phone, and I tried to keep the conversation light, asking about Chloe's reading group, Mason's swim lesson, the new neighbor who'd moved in down the street. Brandon barely looked up, tossing in a "that's nice" or "good for you, buddy" every few minutes. I told myself I was being silly, that he was just tired, that I shouldn't read into it. But inside, everything felt off. The laughter from earlier echoed around the corners of the house, and I felt like I was watching my own life from the outside. After dinner, I asked Brandon to help clear the table. He shot me a look, the same one he'd given me the night before. And with a sigh, he grabbed a few plates and dumped them in the sink. "Happy now?" he muttered, not quite under his breath. Chloe heard it, and her eyes darted between us. I pasted on a smile, told her to go get her pajamas on, and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Later, when the kids were in bed, I sat on the edge of the tub while Mason splashed in the bath, scrolling through the PTA group chat on my phone. Nicole had sent a meme about surviving wine o'clock, and I almost laughed. I typed out a reply, then deleted it, then tried again. My mind kept circling back to that look Brandon gave me, resentful, almost angry, as if asking for help was some kind of betrayal. By the time I got Mason into his pajamas and tucked both kids in, I felt hollowed out. Brandon was in the living room, TV on, watching SportsCenter with the volume low. I sat beside him, close enough to touch, but he didn't reach for me. We watched in silence for a while, and I tried to match my breathing to his, hoping he'd notice me, that he'd say something, anything, to bridge the distance. Instead, I went to bed first, staring at the ceiling fans spinning above me, the hum of the air conditioner filling the room. I replayed the dinner, the looks, the words, over and over. I wondered if this was just what marriage looked like after a decade, after 2 kids, after 1,000 loads of laundry and a million little compromises, or if it was something else, something I couldn't quite admit out loud. The next morning, the Arizona sun was already blazing by 7 a.m. I pulled on my leggings and a tank top, my uniform for the gym and school drop-off, and started packing lunches. Chloe likes her PB&J cut into triangles. Mason wants his apples peeled. I lined up their water bottles, checked the homework folders, and made sure everyone's shoes matched. Brandon came down in his usual rush, already dressed for work, tie half done, coffee in a to-go cup. He kissed the top of my head, a reflex more than anything, and grabbed his laptop bag. "I'll be home late," he called over his shoulder. "Quarterly meetings." I watched him leave, feeling that old ache in my chest, the one that comes when you're surrounded by people but still feel completely alone. The kids argued about the radio station all the way to school, and I fake laughed at their jokes, determined to keep things light. At drop-off, I waved to the other moms, Megan with her perfect blowout, Tara with her yoga mat tucked under her arm, all of us performing the same dance of smiles and small talk. I envied how easy they made it look. After drop-off, I drove to Trader Joe's for groceries. The store was chilly, the air smelling like coffee beans and eucalyptus. I wandered the aisles on autopilot, ticking off items on my list: organic milk, almond butter, frozen orange chicken for nights when I couldn't face cooking from scratch. My phone buzzed with notifications. A reminder for Mason's dentist appointment, an email about Chloe's art show, a group chat blowing up about the upcoming bake sale. But in the middle of the cereal aisle, I froze. My mind kept looping back to that word, high maintenance. I'd always prided myself on being low drama, the cool mom, the one who handled everything without complaint. Was I really asking for too much? Was it unreasonable to want help with dishes, with homework, with the endless parade of chores that never seemed to end? I got back in the car, groceries rattling in the trunk, and sat in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. The house was quiet, sunlight slanting through the blinds, dust motes spinning in the beams. I put everything away, wiped down the counters, and tried to shake the feeling that something was unraveling just out of sight. That afternoon, I met Nicole for coffee at Starbucks. We always sat at the same table in the corner, next to the window overlooking the parking lot. Nicole was already there, her iced latte sweating on the table. She greeted me with a hug, her perfume a mix of vanilla and something sharp, and asked how things were with Brandon. I hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, I told her about the dishes, about the high-maintenance comment, about how I'd overheard Brandon making jokes at my expense. Nicole listened, nodding, sipping her coffee. "Honestly, Steph, that's just how guys are," she said, like it was some universal law. "They complain to their friends, we complain to ours. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you." She gave me a sympathetic smile, but I could tell she didn't really get it. Or maybe she just didn't want to get it. Maybe none of us did, because if we admitted how much it hurt, we'd have to admit how many times we'd swallowed our own needs for the sake of peace. I tried to laugh it off, to change the subject, but the conversation stuck with me all day. Back at home, I did the usual: folded laundry, picked up toys, answered emails about the bake sale. I couldn't shake the sense of unease, the feeling that I was walking on eggshells in my own house. That evening, Brandon was home even later than usual. The kids had already eaten, bathed, and were tucked in, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, half-heartedly browsing Pinterest for dinner ideas. He came in, dropped his keys in the bowl by the door, and immediately went out to the backyard to take a call. I watched him through the window, pacing along the patio, gesturing with his free hand. His voice was low, but every now and then, I caught snippets. Words like overwhelming, never satisfied, expectations. My stomach twisted. When he finally came back inside, I tried to sound casual. "Long day?" I asked, forcing a smile. He shrugged, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Just work stuff," he said, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to push, to ask if it was really just work, but I didn't. Instead, I cleared my throat and mentioned that the recycling needed to go out, and he rolled his eyes, muttering something about nagging. I felt the sting, but bit my tongue. That night, lying in bed next to him, I stared at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing. My mind raced with questions I was too afraid to ask. Was I really that hard to live with? Was I turning into the wife who nitpicks, who makes everything about her? Or was I just asking for the bare minimum, a partner who saw me, who helped carry the load? The days started to blur together. School runs, grocery trips, endless errands. Brandon was more distant than ever, and I caught him texting late at night, phone angled away from me. I told myself not to be paranoid, that he deserved privacy, that I was just tired and oversensitive. But the doubt gnawed at me, a steady drip of anxiety I couldn't turn off. The weekend came, and with it, another round of obligations, a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese for Mason's classmate, a bake sale at the school, Chloe's dance recital. I went through the motions, smiling for photos, chatting with other moms, pretending everything was fine. But every time I glanced at Brandon, he seemed miles away, lost in his own world. On Sunday night, we had dinner at Olive Garden with Brandon's old college friends. I'd always felt a little out of place with them. Inside jokes flying over my head, stories about wild nights before kids and mortgages. I tried to keep up, laughing at the right times, asking about their jobs and kids. But then, as the check arrived, Brandon launched into a story about our house rules, how I have spreadsheets for everything, how I lose it if the towels aren't folded just right. He called me high maintenance again, this time with a theatrical sigh, and everyone laughed. I felt myself shrink in my chair, cheeks burning, wishing I could disappear. I stared down at my plate, pushing pasta around with my fork, trying not to cry. The laughter felt like a spotlight, exposing every insecurity I'd ever tried to hide. When we got home, I went straight upstairs, shutting the door behind me. Brandon didn't follow. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, hugging my knees to my chest, letting the tears finally come. The next morning, I woke up with puffy eyes and a headache. I went through the motions, lunches, backpacks, jackets, moving like a ghost through my own life. At drop-off, Nicole pulled me aside, asked if I was okay. I almost told her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I smiled and said I was just tired. But something had shifted. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Brandon's phone lighting up with messages from his friends, the way he'd step outside to take calls, the way he'd flinch when I asked about his day. I caught him deleting texts once, his thumb moving fast across the screen. When I asked who he was talking to, he said it was just work, but his voice was tight, defensive. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the dark living room, scrolling through my own phone. I found myself searching for articles about emotional labor, about marriages that drift apart, about women who lose themselves in the daily grind. I read story after story of wives who felt invisible, who carried the weight of a family alone. Their words echoed in my head, too close to home for comfort. I started keeping a journal, scribbling down everything I was afraid to say out loud. I wrote about the way Brandon's words echoed long after the laughter faded, about the loneliness that crept in even when the house was full. I wrote about how hard it was to ask for help, how every request felt like a risk, how I hated being seen as difficult or needy. I wrote about the fear that maybe, deep down, I really was too much. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. There was still a part of me that believed we could fix this, that if I just tried harder, if I just found the right words, things would go back to the way they were. I just didn't know how much more I could take before something broke for good. But I still didn't know the worst part. That moment was coming, and when it did, it would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about Brandon, and about myself. I wish I could say things got easier after that night, after I poured my heart out into those pages, but the next few weeks felt like walking across thin ice. Every day, a little more brittle, a little more nerve-wracking. There was a distance between me and Brandon that I didn't know how to cross. He was still polite, still present for the big things, the kids' swim meets, Sunday family dinners at Olive Garden. But there was a new kind of silence in our house, It wasn't the comfortable kind, the one we used to share while folding laundry together or watching reruns late at night. This was sharp, loaded with things unsaid. Sometimes I'd look up from the kitchen counter, catching him scrolling through his phone, and wonder if he was texting the guys, making another joke at my expense, or if he was just as lost as I was. I tried to push through, to focus on the routine, to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't spiral. Mornings were a blur of packing lunches, wrangling Mason into his soccer gear, and rushing Chloe through her spelling lists. I'd drop them at Desert Vista Elementary, wave goodbye to the other moms at the curb, and then drive straight to Trader Joe's, clutching my reusable bags like a lifeline. The air inside always smelled like fresh flowers and coffee, and for a few minutes, surrounded by rows of produce and cheerful employees, I could almost forget everything else. I'd linger over the organic apples, debating between Honeycrisp and Fuji, pretending the biggest decision in my life was which granola bars to buy for the kids' lunchboxes. But even in those small moments, the tension followed me. Nicole noticed it first. She cornered me in the Starbucks drive-thru after drop-off one morning, her caramel macchiato in hand, eyes narrowed with concern. "You look exhausted," she said, not unkindly. "Is Brandon still being, a guy?" I wanted to laugh, to brush it off, but the words stuck in my throat. I just nodded, staring at my own cup, the heat barely warming my palms. Nicole squeezed my arm. "Steph, you're not high maintenance. You're just tired. We all are." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe all of us were carrying more than we let on, smiling for the PTA meetings, posting perfect family photos on Instagram, acting like everything was fine. But at home, it felt like I was the only one struggling to hold things together. The only one afraid of saying the wrong thing. Of being too much. I tried to talk to Brandon a few times. Little moments, in the car after soccer practice, or late at night when the kids were finally asleep. But whenever I brought up the way he'd spoken about me, or the fact that I felt like he was pulling away, he'd deflect. "It's not a big deal," he'd say. Or, I was just joking." Sometimes he'd get defensive, insisting that I was overanalyzing everything, that I needed to relax. Other times, he'd just go quiet, his eyes drifting back to his phone, and I'd be left feeling even more alone than before. The worst was at dinner with his friends, another night at Olive Garden, the kids coloring on their menus, the adults sharing a bottle of cheap red wine. Brandon told that story again, the one about me and the dishes, and this time he added new details, embellishing for laughs. "She's got a chore chart for everything," he said, grinning at his friends. "If it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen. I'm surprised she hasn't scheduled my bathroom breaks yet." Everyone laughed, even Nicole's husband, Mark, who usually stayed out of things. I forced a smile, felt my cheeks burn. I wanted to disappear under the table. I excused myself to take Mason to the bathroom, and while I waited outside the stall, I heard the laughter drifting from the dining room. I heard my own name, Steph, followed by a burst of laughter. I pressed my hand against the cool tile, breathing in, breathing out, trying not to cry. When we returned to the table, Brandon reached for my hand, as if nothing had happened. I let him, but inside, something had shifted. It didn't stop there. The next day, I noticed he was keeping his phone face down on the counter, something he'd never bothered with before. He started taking work calls outside, pacing up and down the backyard, voice low, eyes darting toward the windows. I tried not to let it get to me, tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But the more I noticed, the harder it became to ignore. One afternoon, while the kids were at a birthday party, I decided to grab a glass of wine and finally tackle the mountain of laundry in our bedroom. I was sorting socks, always socks, when I heard Brandon's phone buzz on his nightstand. It was a group chat notification. I glanced at the screen, saw the names, his college friends, the same ones from Olive Garden. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew I shouldn't look, but curiosity won out. I picked up the phone, unlocked it. The passcode was still our anniversary, a small comfort, and scrolled through the messages. What I found made my stomach drop. There were jokes about domestic boot camp, memes about nagging wives. And then, in Brandon's own words, "She's impossible to please. I do one thing wrong and it's World War III. She wants me to be Mr. Mom." The guys chimed in with their own stories, trading complaints, but it was Brandon's words that hit hardest. Impossible to please, Mr. Mom. I set the phone down, hands shaking. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just about dishes. It was about the stories he was telling, about me, to the people closest to him. It was about the way he painted me as unreasonable, demanding, a punchline to their jokes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call Nicole, to show her the messages, to demand that someone, anyone, tell me I wasn't crazy. But instead, I just sat there, surrounded by piles of laundry, staring at the sunlight slanting across the carpet, and I cried. Quiet, ugly tears that I tried to muffle with a towel. This was what it had come to. Sneaking peeks at my own husband's phone, searching for proof that I wasn't imagining things. That night, I didn't mention what I'd seen. I went through the motions, made dinner, helped Chloe with her math homework, watched Mason build a Lego fortress in the living room. Brandon was extra attentive, asking if I wanted ice cream, offering to put the kids to bed. It almost felt normal, except I knew it wasn't. I knew, and I didn't know what to do with that knowledge. The next morning, I woke up before everyone else and sat on the back patio with my coffee, watching the sun rise over the neighbors' palm trees. The air was cool, the world quiet. I thought about all the years we'd spent in this house, all the memories layered over each other. Birthday parties, backyard BBQs, late-night talks on this very patio. I thought about the woman I used to be, before kids, before the chore charts, before I became high maintenance. I wondered if Brandon missed her too. I decided to confront him that night, after the kids were asleep. I rehearsed what I wanted to say 100 times in my head, but when the moment came, all my words tangled together. I told him I'd seen the messages, that I knew what he'd been saying about me. For a second, he looked angry, defensive almost. But then something in his face changed. He looked tired, defeated. He didn't deny it. He just sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I'm sorry, Steph. I shouldn't have said those things. It was stupid." "Why would you tell them I'm impossible to please?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He shook his head. "I don't know. I guess I felt like I was failing, like I couldn't get anything right. It was easier to joke about it than admit I was struggling." I stared at him, trying to read his face. For the first time, I saw the cracks, his own exhaustion, his own fears. "You could have just talked to me," I said. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't know how. Neither of us did. We sat there in silence for a long time. I wanted to believe that things would get better, that this was the turning point, but I was still so hurt. I didn't know how to trust him again, how to trust myself not to overreact or push too hard. But I still didn't know the worst part. That moment was coming, and when it did, it would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about Brandon, and about myself. A few days passed. We tried to act normal for the kids' sake. Brandon offered to help more around the house, loading the dishwasher without being asked, picking up groceries on his way home from work. He even signed up to coach Mason's soccer team, something he'd always said he was too busy for. For a while, it felt like maybe we'd turned a corner. Maybe those ugly words were behind us. But then, one evening, I was folding laundry in our bedroom, because of course I was, and I noticed Brandon had left his laptop open on the bed. I didn't mean to snoop, but the screen caught my eye. A browser window, half filled with text. At first, I thought it was work-related, but then I saw the headline, "Considering Divorce in Arizona. What you need to know about separation." My heart stopped. I clicked through the tabs. There were articles about child custody, alimony, even a questionnaire titled, "Are you ready to leave?" I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Was he really thinking about leaving? Was all of this, his jokes, his distance, even his recent efforts to help, just a way to ease his own guilt? I sat down on the edge of the bed, hands numb. I tried to replay every conversation, every argument, searching for signs I'd missed. Had I pushed him too far? Had he already made up his mind? When he came upstairs, I didn't confront him right away. I just watched him, the way he moved around our room, the way he avoided my eyes. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was scared of what he might say. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything, every joke, every eye roll, every time I'd asked for help and been brushed off. I thought about the way he'd talked about me to his friends, the way he'd painted me as the villain in his story. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe I was the villain. Maybe I was too demanding, too much. Maybe I'd driven him away. The next morning, after the kids were off to school and the house was quiet, I decided I couldn't keep pretending. I found Brandon in the kitchen, making coffee, and I handed him his laptop. "I saw what you were looking at," I said, my voice shaking. He froze, the mug halfway to his lips. "Steph, are you really thinking about leaving?" I asked. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. He set the mug down, staring at the counter. "I don't know," he said finally. I feel like we're stuck. Like nothing I do is good enough. I didn't want to hurt you. I just wanted things to be easier." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you talk to everyone but me?" He rubbed his face, looking so lost. "I was scared. Scared you'd be angry or disappointed. Scared I'd let you down." We stood there, in that awkward, painful silence, and for the first time in months, I felt something shift. Not hope, not yet, but maybe honesty, maybe the beginning of something real. He reached for my hand. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "But I don't know how to fix this." I squeezed his hand, my own voice barely steady. "Then let's figure it out. Together." But even as I said the words, I knew it wouldn't be easy. We had a long way to go, a mountain of resentment and hurt to climb. But for the first time, we were both standing at the bottom, looking up together. If you've ever felt this way, like you're too much or not enough, or caught somewhere in between, please let me know. Leave a like if you've ever struggled to be heard and subscribe, because what happened next truly changed everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and myself. The real shock was still to come. When I thought I'd seen the worst, life had one more twist in store, one that would force me to re-examine everything, and finally, find my own voice. The week after our first counseling session felt like standing on a frozen pond, uncertain with every step whether the ice would hold or crack beneath us. We were careful around each other, like two actors playing roles they didn't fully believe. The air in the house was thick, not quite tense but not comfortable either. I tried to hold on to the hope that by acknowledging the problem, we'd crack the door open to something better. But some days it felt like all we'd done was let in a cold draft. I poured myself into routines, packing lunches, smoothing ponytails, checking homework, shuttling Mason to Little League practice and Chloe to her piano lessons. The comfort of the familiar, the endless cycle of suburban life, was both a relief and a trap. If I kept moving, maybe I wouldn't have to think about how fragile everything felt. Maybe I wouldn't have to hear Brandon's voice in my head, calling me high maintenance, or see the way his friends looked at me over Olive Garden breadsticks, like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't understand. But life, of course, doesn't let you stay distracted for long. It has a way of forcing you to face what you'd rather ignore. It started with an email from the PTA president about the upcoming school fundraising gala. I'd signed up months before to chair the decorations committee, back when I believed I could do it all, and that being busy was the same as being fulfilled. Now, the thought of wrangling volunteers and color schemes made my stomach twist. But I couldn't back out. not with my name already on the flyer and Chloe chirping about how excited she was to dress up for the big night. The first committee meeting was on a Wednesday evening at the home of Melissa, one of those women who made everything look effortless. Perfect hair, perfect snack trays, perfect Instagram stories. I walked in late, apologizing, clutching my notepad like a lifeline. The other moms, some friends, some friendly rivals, were already deep in discussion about centerpieces and raffle baskets. I tried to focus, to contribute, but my mind kept drifting. When Melissa passed me a glass of Chardonnay, her eyes lingering a moment too long, I wondered if she'd heard about Brandon's group chat, if any of them had. Afterward, as we loaded up cars on Maple Avenue with leftover supplies, Nicole caught up to me. She hesitated before speaking, unusual for her. "Steph, can I ask you something? Don't get mad." Immediately, my chest tightened. "Sure," I said, bracing myself. She looked down, playing with her keys. "Is everything okay with you and Brandon? I mean, he seemed kind of off at the last soccer game. And I heard some of the guys talking about, well, how things have been tense at your house." I felt my cheeks flush, a hot wave of humiliation breaking over me. So it wasn't just in the group chat. The story was out, ricocheting around the neighborhood like an errant soccer ball. I forced a laugh. "Yeah, we're working through some stuff. You know how it is." She nodded, but her eyes were full of questions. "If you ever need to talk, you know I'm here, really. And for what it's worth, I think asking your husband to help around the house is like the bare minimum. If that makes you high maintenance, then I'm a total diva." I managed a real smile, grateful for her loyalty. "Thanks, Nick. I might take you up on that." But as I drove home, I kept replaying her words. The bare minimum. Was that all I'd been fighting for? And if so, why did it feel like I was asking for the world? That night, after the kids were finally asleep, I found Brandon in the living room, laptop open, headphones in. He glanced up as I entered, guilt flickering in his eyes, then quickly masked. For a moment, I nearly walked away. It was easier sometimes to just let the distance settle between us, to pretend we were both too tired to talk. But I couldn't keep doing that. Not if I wanted things to change. "Can we talk?" I asked quietly. He closed his laptop, nodding. "Yeah, of course." I sat on the edge of the couch, twisting my wedding ring. "Did you know the other dads have been talking about us? About how things have been at home?" He winced. "Yeah, I heard." Did you tell them? About our fight?" He hesitated, then nodded, shame coloring his voice. "I did. I shouldn't have, but I did. I was angry, and it was easier to make you the problem than to admit I didn't know how to fix anything." Something inside me broke, but not in the way I expected. The anger I'd been carrying gave way to a kind of exhausted sadness. "I just wish you'd talk to me instead." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know. I'm sorry. I've been an ass. I guess I didn't want to look weak, like I couldn't handle marriage or being a dad or you." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to be something you have to handle, Brandon. I want to be your partner, but I can't do that if you're always making me the joke or the problem whenever things get hard." His eyes met mine, raw and unguarded. "I know. I'm trying, Steph. I really am." We sat in silence for a long time, the kind that feels heavy but necessary. Finally, I spoke. "I think we need to keep going to counseling. Not just for us, but for the kids, too. I don't want them to think this is what marriage looks like." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I want that too." It wasn't a solution, but it was something. A small stepping stone across the frozen pond. The following week, our therapist asked us to write down, separately, what we each needed to feel respected and supported at home. It sounded simple, but the exercise left me staring at a blank page for nearly an hour. What did I need? The list should have been easy: help with chores, acknowledgement, a partner who saw me, not just what I did. But as I sat there, the real truth pressed in. I wanted to feel worthy of support. I wanted to believe I could ask for help without being labeled too much, that I could need things and still be loved. When we shared our lists, Brandon's was short. I want to feel valued. Like what I bring to the table matters, even if it's not always what you want. Mine was longer, but I forced myself to be honest. I need you to listen without making jokes. I need to know I'm not the only adult in this house. And I need to stop feeling like I have to earn your respect. He flinched at that, but he didn't argue. Progress, I thought. The work was slow and messy. Some days, we fell into old patterns, snapping over little things, blaming each other for the chaos of life with 2 kids, a mortgage, work stress piling up like laundry on the guest bed. But there were glimmers of hope, too. Nights when we talked instead of fighting. Mornings when Brandon made coffee and packed the kids' lunches without being asked. Tiny gestures, but they meant everything. One Saturday, we took the kids to the park, something we hadn't done in months. As we watched Chloe and Mason race across the jungle gym, Brandon squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything." I let myself lean into him, just for a moment. Me too. But the real test came when we started planning the Memorial Day BBQ, a tradition in our neighborhood, the unofficial start of summer. In years past, I'd done everything: the invites, the menu, the decorations, the cleanup. This time, I handed Brandon the guest list and told him he was in charge of the grill and drinks. He didn't roll his eyes or make a joke. He just nodded, and for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were on the same team. The day of the BBQ dawned hot and bright, the Arizona sun relentless even at 9 a.m. The backyard was a blur of red, white, and blue streamers, folding chairs, kids squealing as they darted through sprinklers. I set up the food table while Brandon manned the grill, flipping burgers and chatting with the guys. For a while, I watched him, waiting for the old dynamic to surface, for him to make some crack about high-maintenance wives or needing to escape to the golf course. But he didn't. He was present, attentive, different. As neighbors filtered in, Melissa with her signature fruit salad, Nicole carrying a tray of cupcakes, I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew some of them had heard the stories, had whispered about us when they thought I wasn't listening. I could see it in their sidelong glances, the cautious way they asked how we were doing. But as the afternoon wore on, something shifted. Brandon called everyone over for a toast, raising his plastic cup. "Hey, I just want to say thanks for coming out," he began, voice steady. "And I also want to say something else, something I should have said a long time ago. My wife, she does more for this family, and for me, than I ever give her credit for. I haven't always been great about showing it, but I'm learning. And if that makes me high maintenance, then so be it." There was a pause, then laughter, genuine, not mocking, and a round of applause. My cheeks burned, but this time it was pride, not shame. Brandon caught my eye, and in that look was an apology, a promise, and something like hope. After the crowd drifted back to their conversations, Nicole sidled up to me. "Well, that was something." I grinned, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Yeah, it was." Later, as the sun dipped behind the palm trees and the kids roasted marshmallows over the fire pit, Brandon approached me. "You okay?" I nodded, tears prickling my eyes. "I think I am." He wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. "We're gonna be okay, Steph." I know it. For the first time in a long time, I believed him. Of course, not everything was perfect. Some friendships shifted. Melissa grew distant, her polite smiles a little tighter at school drop-off. A few of the guys stopped inviting Brandon to their weekly poker nights. But new connections formed, too. Nicole and I grew closer, and I found myself talking more openly to other moms, sharing stories. Not just the polished ones for Instagram, but the messy, complicated truths of marriage and motherhood. The hardest part was learning to set boundaries, not just with Brandon, but with myself. I had to let go of the idea that being easy or low maintenance was the only way to deserve love. I had to learn to ask for help and to accept it, even when it felt uncomfortable. Sometimes, I still hear that voice in my head, the one that says I'm asking too much, but now I know how to answer it. I remind myself that needing things doesn't make me weak or selfish. It makes me human, and that's enough. If you've ever felt like you were too much, or not enough, or trapped somewhere in between, you're not alone. I hope you'll share your story with me. Leave a like if you've ever struggled to be heard, and subscribe, because what happened next truly changed everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and myself. Because the real shock was still to come. Just when I thought I'd seen the worst, life had one more twist in store, one that would force me to re-examine everything, and finally, find my own voice. But that's a story for next time. If you think this confession was intense, wait until you hear what happened when I discovered the secret Brandon had been hiding for years, one that would make the high-maintenance label seem laughable by comparison. For now, I'm just grateful to be here, telling my story, and hoping it helps someone else feel a little less alone.